Hi. Thanks so much for
Hi.
joining me today.
Yeah, I'm so
Um,
glad to be here.
yeah, so to the audience out there, my name is Crispin Spaeth. I'm here with Beth Batson, and we're here to discuss some things we have in common around embodiment in the workplace. I'm a movement, performance, and presence coach. I teach something called Integrative Alexander Technique, and I work with individuals through private coaching and group classes, and I also do workplace trainings. And I invited Beth to join me today because she also, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in a second, um, does a lot of work with, and has for a long time with physical practices, mind-body practices through yoga and other strategies, approaches, and then also is, I think you call yourself an executive coach, and that's where you can correct me for people who are seeking that authentic, whole self, embodied application of themselves to the work experience. So, Beth, introduce yourself, correct everything that I've said incorrectly, and tell us about you and your business.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. My name is, so again, you said my name, but my name is Beth Batson. I I honestly call myself a bunch of different things, but I think it comes down to the fact that I am an embodiment and mindset coach. My training is as an ontological coach, but through years of, you mentioned movement practices, through years of teaching yoga and also through several other trainings. My work really ultimately I'm partnering with my clients, whether they're executives, whether they're creatives, whether they're entrepreneurs. I'm partnering with my clients to even from a nervous system perspective, come home to themselves. So it's about building inner trust, building agency, simply kind of having more ease. I think that from my familiarity with what you do, a lot of your work is building ease in the body, like the skeletal structure. And again, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. And I'm building ease sort of with the nervous system and with emotions and discomfort. I like to think of it as a bit of yoga off the mat because it's focusing on staying grounded and intentional, even when life is uncomfortable or even when there's discomfort.
Hmm. Yeah, so we have so much in common in terms of what we want for people, and our just how we get there is different. So yes, it's true that the skeleton is kind of where I start with most people around finding that ease of movement. And the nervous system stuff kind of comes online very quickly once people are moving in coordination with their own physical design. So the skeleton is kind of like, big building blocks of that we can get a lot of return on investment as to our theme just
Mhm.
by addressing that first, and then other things start to come out. So one way that we differ is that I don't start with talking, and I'm not a trained therapist or certified coach in the way that I think you are, but people do start talking eventually, in that their ideas come out, their history comes out because of this finally being in coordination and, as you say, coming home to their body, and they're like, oh, here's this idea that's no longer useful to me. Could this be
Mm-hmm.
impacting what's going on? And in those moments, my response is usually, well, I don't know if it's impacting what's going on, probably, but the fact that you said it means that it's here to teach you something, or that you can let it go.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so things kind of, it's almost like off gassing happens conceptually when
Yeah.
people start talking.
I love
Um,
that.
so I just went off on a bit of a tangent, but tell me how people know that they um, want to come work with you. How do clients find you? What do they recognize in themselves that could use a change?
Mm. I think I think because it's subtler work, I always think of my work as a coach not about helping people achieve some goal. Like it's not like a linear straight line of sort of a new job or a promotion. It's more of an expanding sense of knowing who they are. So a lot of the people who I work with come to me because they have a feeling of discontent or feeling burnt out. And I think that that's because they have already gone through years and years of putting themselves second, of not setting boundaries, of saying maybe saying yes when they really wanted to say no, or prioritizing everyone else over themselves. And that takes a toll over time. And especially for women or those who are socialized as women, I think it takes a really big toll because those are the people who are often put into places of service or caregiving roles that are not really financially compensated very well. So there's people who get burnt out or even resentful. Um, yeah, and then you add in the hormonal shifts of perimenopause and menopause, and I think that it creates even more sort of discontent and unwilling to put up with how it's been going. So people who I work with are often, whether no matter their gender, are kind of fed up with how things are going, see that they could be going a different way, and yet they have the awareness, but they still aren't taking the actions they want to be taking. There's something that's like not quite
Mm-hmm.
quite having them shift into acting differently. And it's a hard
Mm-hmm.
place to be, having that awareness, but still sort of acting or reacting to life in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day about uh, like people come to me because something feels off, like they just can't, it's just not adding up, or there's a lack of traction in moving forward toward what they think they should be able to do or what they want to do,
Mm-hmm.
or they've
Mm-hmm.
kind of plateaued in one way or another. And that like they come looking to just get over the hump kind of, but it requires a paradigm shift that they don't necessarily um, not that there's a bait and switch or anything, but they don't necessarily recognize that the tools that got them to this point can only go so far. And now
Yeah.
there's going to be a change in thinking and approach to kind of everything in order to help them move forward. Do you see that with your people?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, what I was thinking of was this analogy that used to always come up with my coach and my colleagues and some leadership training I did, where so many people come. What I heard was, people come with this apartment that they're living in, wanting to be like, I need your help moving the furniture around. They're like, I've moved the furniture here. I'm going to move the furniture here. And it sounds like your work. And that what my work is actually showing them that maybe the apartment doesn't serve them. And it's not about moving the furniture around. We actually need to like leave the apartment and create a better space,
Hmm.
body,
Hmm.
life, perspective. Um, because that apartment and the furniture doesn't serve them anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. Or knock the wall down between this apartment and
Yeah.
the one next door because you need
Yeah.
more space.
Expand
Yeah.
to remodel. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You need a more expansive life. Well, you have to give yourself a little more room to do that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, you and I have met before this call to kind of talk about what we see as um, missing in the conversation about embodiment in the workplace. And we came up with our question that we're going to work today together, which is what's the ROI of embodiment in the workplace? Now,
I love
I
this
think that,
question.
yeah, it's so good, right? I don't have hard numbers on it. I don't know if you have dollars to, so we might get some qualitative, anecdotal data over quantitative data.
Hmm.
I will note that one of my colleagues, Priska Gauger in Switzerland, worked with the Victorinox company to quantify the results of doing Alexander technique, which is the methodology that I use in the workplace. And they had fewer absences due to injury, so fewer injuries and quicker recovery. They had better morale based on how the employees described it themselves. There's one other I'm forgetting, but all very, very interesting stuff. And that was really, her work is really around um, both communication skills and not kind of not being overly reactive, I would say. I'm putting
Mhm.
words in her mouth. That's what I think it is. And then also the physical skills of she does something called balance time. So it's very specific. People take breaks and take a moment to work with their bodies in ways that if you're a machinist and you're working over the um, prototype making machine and you are prone to repetitive stress injuries, taking a break and resorting yourself so that you can come back to the work freshly, like just as a person. Doesn't that
Mm-hmm.
sound better than not doing?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a specific example from somebody else's world. But are there things that stand out to you as being with your clients as being
Yeah.
effective
Well,
in ways that help them do their job more
mm-hmm.
productively, efficiently? I don't know what language you want to put around the what the KPI is.
Well, I was having this conversation with a leadership group at a law firm recently, and actually it started simply with being having the conversation around what, and it was, we use different words, but I would say what does embodiment mean? And and the way I sort of shared with them was this idea of like, I think of embodiment as, because I'm thinking from like a sort of an energetic sense of embodiment is the ability to stay kind of like to meet the moment as you are. And in doing
Mm,
so, it's a way of kind of while you're engaged with the external world, staying connected or being able to reconnect with relative ease to our internal signals, our sensations, our emotions, our nervous system state. Um, and in IFS or internal family systems, which I've done a bunch of trainings in and then find so valuable in the work that I do, is that when we have a stronger sense of connection to ourselves, or if we are more embodied, then we have access to what Dick Schwartz calls are the 5 Ps, which is presence. Let me think if I can remember these. Um, Presence, patience, perspective, playfulness. I'm
pickles?
forgetting the fifth one. Hmm? What?
Pickles?
Pickles and
Yeah.
pickles.
Yeah.
So I would say that, in my mind, when I'm working with clients, we're always thinking about that piece of embodiment of how can you connect with that self energy? How can you connect with your values, your commitments, that energy that is you, so that you can engage with the world not from your interpretations or your expectations or that event that happened 6 months ago, 6 years ago, or 6 decades ago. Because when we are embodied, if we have access to presence and especially presence, perspective, and patience in the sense of workplace, then to, we can collaborate with others. We can have we can think critically. Um, we can problem solve. We can meet an argument, with the space to hear it or a conflict with the space to hear it. And I even heard, as you were bringing up the example of the Alexander technique in the workplace, is both our nervous system, our physiology, and our modern workplace is built for efficiency. To have as few, basically to be as productive as possible, to be as seamless as possible. And yet in doing that, some of the problem solving or some of the ability to maybe sense a danger for injury can get lost because we just go into this rhythm where we almost can shut off, and not necessarily in a bad way, but I almost see it as like we can become disembodied. We can almost dissociate from the present moment and just go through the motions. And while that can be productive in some way, I think that there's also a loss.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and that's where I think the injury comes in, or lack of addressing conflict when it comes up, um, not responding to emails in a timely manner because you are afraid of hurting somebody's feelings or afraid to acknowledge that you don't have the answer. It's, all of these ways that people are acting from a place of protection rather than a full embodied sense of self.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I wanted to jump in like 5 times. So let me
Yeah, and
let's
I
see
was
if I
like,
can.
did I even answer the question?
Yeah. Well, the I don't remember what the question was, but but
Yeah,
here's what I
doesn't
want to
matter.
say now. So
Yeah.
the the idea of embodiment to me, like I often struggle with the terms mind body with embodiment because my perspective is whole self, and
Mhm.
that doesn't mean anything to anybody. So I like to kind of think of the things we can do on purpose, move, think, and communicate. And those things that we can do, that we can make choices about, are when we think of them as not separate from each other, head to toe, we're communicating and thinking beings, right? So movement, thinking, and communication always go together. You asked earlier about the starting with the skeleton. That's one way in. Another way in is when I was a contemporary dance choreographer and also working with other artists, that creative thinking is another way in to look for interference in your system. Like where are things not adding up? Or in communication, like when I work with people on public speaking is the most obvious example, but I also work with people around how they communicate in daily life or whether they feel that they can meet new people or make new friends. So all of these different ways of what you might think of as physical shyness or something, or so certainly nervous system is at play. And when we work in a way that all of those things are playing well together, things just generally get easier, just
Hmm.
easier, right? So if productivity is a value in terms of ease of doing things and getting things done, when all those things are working together, yeah, your factory is going to be more efficient. Your meetings are going to be more effective. People are going to not give in to that one person who takes all the air in the room. That's kind of a fighting example. Or the person that takes all the air in the room, maybe they'll start to notice, oh, I'm zoning out in my own thoughts, but actually there are 15 people here who might have some feedback, input, response, and
Yeah.
I'm wasting time and money. So one of the
Yeah.
things that can get in the way of that is when there's a difference in hierarchy,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So to my mind, if leaders, and tell me if you see this in any of the people that you work with, if leaders learn these skills, they're going to be able to draw out the best, most creative, even most devoted in their staff, in their people, if this embodiment or whole selfness, embodiment, whole self. I'm gonna call those equal right now. Does
Yeah.
that sound right? Okay. Yeah. So they're gonna get the best out of their people if they account for this in their workplace. What do you think?
Yes. two things that are
Mm,
coming up. One, just as you were speaking about embodiment, then I immediately thought of flow, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name because I would completely not do it justice. But that concept of flow, and I was thinking about flow on a personal sense. When you're in flow, time goes, things feel effortless. And then I was also thinking like from on a whole system perspective, how, when if a culture of embodiment is supported, then there's just a different way of the whole system of the workplace moving that I think is more efficient, more creative, more resilient, more agile. Um, I completely forgot your question.
we're just talking. We're just
I
talking.
know.
Let's
I
not taking
know.
keeping score here. So if somebody were looking for kind of more traditional checking the boxes of return on investment, let's talk about an individual, for instance, who comes to you um, for
Mhm.
help. What do you think gets better in their, and let's keep it to the workplace, in their work life that makes it worthwhile to invest in coaching?
Mm, yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is in a way, they feel like they get their time back. There's a
Mm,
lot less sort of time leaks
mm,
because of being in paralysis, like in procrastinating getting something done for fear of it landing the wrong way. So I would say that they immediately feel like they have more space in their day. They, um, they get sick less because their nervous system isn't so activated, which impacts our immune system. Um, I immediately notice in a few of my clients that come to mind is that they are seen like through reviews, or even like whether it's a review or a promotion, greater sense of trust and respect. Like people view them more as a leader because they just are showing up less concerned about kind of protecting themselves and more about supporting the culture around them, making sure those that are working maybe under them are feeling supported and seen. And then, the other one that really comes up often is the dynamic with people who maybe work, if we're talking about a tiered system, maybe upper management from them or the CEO or the CFO. Um, there becomes and I don't know, very little of this seems measurable, except there's way more joy and ease in their day. They're not like resenting going to work, but they say that there's a greater sense of collaboration, both downline and upline, and because there's like less time repairing communications or cleaning up misunderstandings.
hmm
Yeah, I think that's kind of what comes up for me the most is nothing changes, but everything changes.
Right. I would think that something someone could measure would be this would be over a lot of numbers, right? Retention,
Yes. Less sick days, less
less sick
turnover,
days.
probably,
Yeah.
maybe less, I don't know, do people get like like less negative reviews or less,
hmm
you know,
Maybe people are more willing to apply for promotion. And wouldn't
yeah.
that be fun? Yeah. So these are all things that, future state. Embodiment in the
Yeah.
workplace. Measure these
Maybe
things, people.
maybe the HR department would feel less like they need to be mediators
Mm.
in conflict. Yeah.
hmm Okay. Future state. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh man.
Okay. So, one more question for you.
Yeah.
How we've talked about that feeling of people feeling like something is I use the word off to describe my people. Something's not, was it stuckness? What was the term you used for how people would recognize that they need you?
I would say stuck, or I don't remember the
Mm-hmm.
word that I used earlier, but I would say stuck or dissatisfied, maybe off.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And is there
I
any,
would say, oh, go ahead.
this is there, so if that's how what they recognize in themselves, what do you recognize in them? Like sometimes those are not exactly the same things when people come to see us, right?
Hmm. Oh, that's a hard one. The first
Okay.
thing that the first thing that comes to mind is a at some point they stopped thinking that I don't know why, but so I'm, my age, there's this band called the Lemonheads, and there's this song. I'm from the Midwest, maybe they're from the Midwest, and um, one of the lyrics was, I don't want a bit part in your life. And I
Mm,
always think about that with my clients. And I would say that what I notice in them is that they have become a bit part in their life.
mm,
And they've sort of handed off control, throughout their time. And so what I see is one, just this, like I have so much compassion for them because for some reason they decided that it was safer, it was more comfortable, it was easier. They gained something by giving away all of their lines in an acting sense. And so that I think what I'm seeing is that they've given away their
mm,
agency. And
mm-hmm,
so it's an opportunity for us to reconnect with actually what they want. Because in order to give away your agency, you kind of need to stop asking yourself what you want in order
right.
to be okay with it.
Yeah. So, I lied. It's not the last question. So, so kind of what the energy leak for individuals, it sounds like that's one of the things that you see in
Hmm.
people pretty quickly. And
Yeah.
you and I have the shared experience of working I worked on one feature film. I know that you worked in more than that in media and photo production. I worked in
Yeah. Photo
corporate,
production.
yeah, I worked
Yeah.
in corporate event production. And the energy leak on from a systems wide perspective, on miscommunications, on um, uh, leadership, I'll just say ego. Like if someone says, I want it my way, and then like the whole universe has to scramble around um, making that happen when it might be the best thing, but it might not be the best, like 90% of the time. This is an exercise in improving something to you, but um,
Hmm.
so that kind of system-wide energy leak when people are in survival mode to prove themselves or to hide from the danger. So that's kind of the opposite of to hide from the danger, to hide from to stay in a really like a buffered safe zone versus I guess proving yourself is also a buffered safe zone in a way, but
Just in a different way.
it's just in a different way. Yeah. So I see
But
like
such
that
a costly energy leak.
costly, man.
I mean,
Like
I
in an
have been,
arena. Yeah. Go tell a
yeah.
story.
Um, I mean, I have been in so I worked in the film industry primarily doing set building, prop styling, food styling. And so I was on the creative end. And so before a shoot, I would spend, how many days and how much money sourcing all of the things to pretty much make their vision come to life. And there have been times that we have gone into overtime or that there's been a last minute shift in scope. And there's this one time that I very much know that a lot was added on, not because it was essential for the actual end product, but for the creative director to look good. They needed to prove themselves. It was a bit of
Mm-hmm.
like a machismo sort of
Mm-hmm.
posturing, almost like I'm thinking about a
Mm-hmm.
bird trying to show all their
Mm-hmm.
feathers.
Give me
It
more
is
feathers. Give me
protective.
more feathers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and the impact on us in terms of just time and energy, but then also like the extra money that was put in really just to try to gain a sense of validation,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think
Yeah.
that I'm not saying that with disdain. I'm saying that was a lot of love because it is, you know, it is protective. It's there's
Yes.
just a cost to it.
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
cost also impacts other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
But
I've
you
been
know, I
in
have never worked in an
similar.
arena. Yeah, as much to say. I'm sure that
Oh, yeah. I mean, I never saw the big uh, budget line items, but I know how much my time was worth and multiply that by the 75 people in this room alone. That's a lot of
yeah.
money per hour or whatever. Yeah. And or even in smaller conference rooms where a decision isn't getting made because someone is stuck in their nervous system
Hmm.
and everyone else is like, we can't move
Yeah.
forward now. So can
Yeah, or
we leave
somebody
the
doesn't want to step
meeting
on
or?
someone's toes.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So part of, to sum it up, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that part of the way that both you and I work with people with embodiment in the workplace is that you learn to recognize your own responses to situations so that you can make new choices, so that you have options for making new choices in how you respond to others.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Because can only we all want to control how the other person is going to respond or react or what they're going to do, but all we can really look at is how we can engage and respond to the
Right.
situation.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, it seems like in both of our scenarios, it's looking at like how does our self respond or react and allowing kind of giving our clients the support they need to respond more,
Hmm.
like respond from a place of choice rather than react from a place of maybe
Hmm.
fear or scarcity or lack or protection.
Hmm. Choice, creativity, curiosity, all the things that
Yeah.
build those connections that those are my
Yeah.
four C's, I guess. Build those connections that make business work worthwhile and move forward.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's what separates sort of lets the really amazing businesses and companies rise to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, friend. Is there anything you want to share with the audience here? Anything you want to offer to them? Or how do they find you? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, I think it'll be in maybe some of the notes, but I do have a retreat coming up in a month. Very local and very time limited, but it's on Whidbey Island at the Whidbey Institute in Washington State, April 25th through the 27th. And the whole intention behind the retreat is to support those who give, say, 200% of you to your work and to others and rarely take the time to recharge. So then we fall into these tropes
Mm-hmm.
of reaction. Um, and so it's going to be a weekend of really like rest and play and presence and creativity and collaboration, all those things that we talked about. I also want to share that one of the things that I love doing with people that are new to my work is I have a 90-minute one-on-one mapping session where we get to
Mm-hmm.
really look at your lived experience, say in the workplace or in a relational dynamic, to see one, building awareness of those probably patterns, like predictable patterns of how we do respond in times of stress or pressure or power dynamics. Um, Reconnect with that sense of self, that embodied sense of self, imagine what, like, feel what it feels like, and then come up with practices so that when we notice ourselves sort of coming from that reactive place, having tools to really come back to that embodied place. And that's, you know, I offer a discount on that, and that's $200 for a 90-minute session. And
Great.
it's open to anybody. Yeah.
Wonderful. So we'll share that link in comments. And Thank you, friend. Really fun
Thank you.
to talk with you today about all things embodiment in the workplace, how it can impact communication and efficiency and how people feel about their jobs and their lives.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. So,
More want tos and less have tos.
yes, yes. Yeah. I'm here for that. All right.
I
Thank you
know.
so much and see you around the
Thank
block.
you. Next time I get to ask you questions.
Yes.